Hey guys, it's Matthew here once again, and today I wanted to talk about Delirium League. Basically just a review or my feelings on the league as a whole, given that it's ending pretty damn soon, and we've basically played it through and through and done as many characters as possibly could. So it's time to kind of just talk about what went wrong, what went right, mostly what went wrong, I think, and how I feel about the league. Now, with that opening statement, I don't want to say that I hated the league. I didn't hate the league, and I played it all 90 days or whatever, and I still had a lot of fun, and I didn't find it challenging to play or to log in and get hours in. I didn't hate engaging with it that much by the end of it. It was still good for what it was, but there's so many criticisms here that I have that are going to make it sound like I hated it, basically. All I'm really going over here is the fact that so many things could have been done better, and highlighting some of the issues for a lot of players, because I believe this was a pretty polarizing league. At least that's my sort of feeling on the mechanic, where some people are going to really love it because it plays to their strengths and their playstyle in Path of Exile, and some, or a lot of people, are going to just hate what it brought to the table and what it forced you to do. And the key word that I've been using all league for my own personal taste is oppressing. Like, the league mechanic is very oppressing. So with that, I'll talk over the top of a bit of gameplay of the league itself. And what I mean when I say oppressing is the fact that it constantly keeps you like under the hammer. Basically, as soon as you touch the mirror, you are under the pump. You are constantly assaulted by shit. You have to go through a certain... It's essentially a gauntlet. You pop the timer and it's a gauntlet from here on out. Every map is turned into a gauntlet where you are against the clock, you're against the enemies that constantly spawn, explode, trigger certain effects, and it is very oppressing in the way that if you don't have a really strong character, it just pushes you right the fuck down. It doesn't like make you want to engage with it because it's very difficult to get around. It's very difficult to play the game at a normal rate at that point because there's just so much shit going on, and it's just constantly hampering your ability to do anything unless you have a really strong character. So part of the people that I'm talking about that are really going to enjoy it are the ones that build the strong, overpowered characters and zoom from map to map and whatever. It doesn't even have to be a headhunter, anything like that. It can just be really fast, clear speed characters, and ones that are pretty, well invested to have a well-built, well-oiled machine, because that's the key to enjoying and beating Delirium. It's having a character that can essentially ignore the fucking mechanics, because if you don't ignore them and you do have to play around them, if you just actually focus on any of the stuff throughout these next couple maps where I just go pretty slow and I just engage with most of the Delirium content, you'll notice that just about fucking everything explodes and has a mechanic to deal with. Whereas traditionally, you run around in a map and most things aren't very threatening. There's a few packs of enemies. Some would explode like a porcupine. That's a pretty rare thing. You come into most packs that just have maybe a rare monster that might be a little bit tough, but by and large, like, one of the most annoying things out there prior to this would be like volatile flame bloods. You trigger it, it then chases you, you have to pop it, but it feels kind of annoying to have to deal with. And if you've got like Nemesis mod on the map and lots of Beyond, for example, and you have like 5 volatiles or 10 volatiles like triggered throughout a map, it's pretty noticeable and it's very annoying. Whereas cut forward to Delirium, there's about fucking 50 instances per map where you have to deal with that. If you actually like try and focus on that stuff, just about everything you attack somehow explodes. Just about every pack you run over triggers some exploding chaining shit that chases after you. Just about every single mob has a delayed attack that you have to deal with. And then as well as that, the delay of running over things and them spawning. And it becomes, as I've mentioned many times now, oppressing to have to play around for characters that aren't truly strong. So by the time I got to the late league where I had really strong characters and I was comfortable using a lot of my currency on beefing out characters, it was a lot easier to deal with. Delirium was basically a non-factor, and it was just annoying to have to like run over stuff and make sure it spawns, and as well as that, just go fast, fast, fast. It was just a bit annoying in that regard. And as well as that, the gray scaling. You just hated the gray. So by the end of the league, I was just sick of having no color in the game. But once my characters were strong, it didn't feel that bad at all to have to deal with this stuff. Whereas in the first month of the league or so, especially prior to the buffs of the visuals and all of that, it felt pretty damn bad to have to struggle through a lot of this content. Now, before I get too overwhelmingly negative, I will say that overall, like I said, I didn't hate engaging with it to begin with. The first couple of months, and I don't think anyone's really expected to play all 3 months, but the first couple of months, it was, you know, a bunch of extra monsters, a bit of extra challenge, and there was quite a decent amount of loot that you wanted to get from the thing, and the simulacrum was a lot of fun, and some of the bosses were pretty damn cool, but it's just, it's potentially just one that really wears down on you as time goes on. But even then, I could still do it, and it still wasn't that much of a chore. It was just kind of oppressing and kind of monotonous to get that same gray, because one that I use as an example in the past is something like Incursion. Incursion was a lot of fun to start with when it first came out in the league, but by the end of Incursion I was sick of dealing with that league mechanic, and it just felt like a chore. Like by month 2 into it, I just really didn't want to engage with the temples and have to go do them, and I started avoiding them, and even then it felt like a chore, and I was pulling 4 or 5 hour days as opposed to 6 or 7 hour days in a league where it feels good to play. And Delirium, I can still avoid some of the times, and most of the time when I'd avoid Delirium and didn't pop a mirror, it was because I could see color in the game. It's not because I didn't want to like get loot, I didn't want to do the challenge, it's because I wanted to enjoy a map without gray all the fuck over it. So that's the biggest critique of like that after a long time throughout an entire league. There's just too much gray, and it just took over the entire game to the point where you couldn't appreciate its art anymore like you used to be able to. But you definitely could still engage with the mechanic, especially when you had the stronger characters, and it didn't feel that bad, but it's something that did definitely wear down your desire to engage with the mechanic, because there's just so much going on, and it changes a map from what it once was to a completely different game, completely different map, and you have to do it every single map. And if you don't do it, you feel like you're missing out on a lot, and you feel like you're not getting anywhere near as much XP as you should, anywhere near as much loot as you should. It just became very mandatory and a bit too much, I think. And I feel like I'm kind of repeating myself here a bit as well, so apologies for that. But the other thing that I think was kind of a miss on the league is the loot. There's just too much loot. Like, you can argue that's a great thing, and loot, cool. Game about loot, yep. But the point is that loot became meaningless. There's just too much of it, and things like the simulacrum having to deal with loot explosions, I don't find very fun at all. So blight maps, prior to being buffed, I thought they were okay. They were kind of worth it. You go in, you get a pile of loot, then people complain they didn't do enough, and then they buff the loot. And I fucking hated engaging with blight maps, because the After Effects loot was just so tedious to have to sift through and go through, and you're not like playing the game at that point, you're just like picking up stuff you might want to pick up and identifying, and there's just so much of it. And likewise with Simulacrum, likewise with some of the buffed Delirium rewards at the end of a map or throughout a Delirium-based map, there's just too much loot, and it became so meaningless and so pointless that you didn't really care about picking it up. I had 1,000 alks by the end of the league, over 1,000 chisels, infinite map sustain, and that's like 5 times more than any previous league for an ending that I'd probably ever had before. It was far and away just too much loot, I think. Which, you know, I can direct you to my stash tab and show you what I mean, but like I said, the chisels, the alks, blessed orbs were just all over the place. I use sextants more this league than any previous league before, and it's pretty much impossible for me to run out unless I did it on absolutely every map and stayed on characters for a longer period to map onto them into like level 100 and, you know, or above 90 or whatever. Regrets were too plentiful, Horizons are too plentiful, like just about nothing meant anything. I used GCPs just to straight up 20 qual garbage gems that I couldn't be bothered buying elsewhere, just to go from 0 to 20 qual, because I could easily afford to do that without even using the GCP recipe. Just non-stop, all of this sort of stuff was raining from the sky. And you could argue that it's good to have it be plentiful and never have to run out, never have to worry about it. But my argument is that it becomes meaningless. Like, you don't care about this loot. You aren't very impacted by it dropping. You don't really, it doesn't have any gravity to it, any weight anymore. The only thing that you could possibly get excited about dropping is like an Exalt. And even then, I probably found like 100 of these this league. It was pretty ridiculous. So overall, I think the loot just became a bit too devalued with this level of loot. So you have to, I mean, the next league I think looks like it's already addressing that in a very positive manner. There won't be as much loot dropping, and the impactful stuff is going to be affecting your crafting towards your current gear or future gear. So I think that's already really good, and that's a positive change from this league to the next. And just about everything I'm complaining about right now sounds like it's actually going to be changed from one league to the next, so they may have already learnt from their mistakes in that regard. But it might be kind of a swing too far in the other direction with the color scheme. Potentially it's just going to be too many colors as opposed to just pure gray, but we'll have to wait and see how that goes. It does look rather pretty, at least for now. Whereas, yep, the way that the game is impacted is completely different, so you won't have to zoom through a map as fast as humanly possible, and if you can't keep up, you feel bad or die or run out of potential, you know, league mechanic to engage with, so the loot and all that. Instead, you'll just be able to pick and choose whenever you do that, and I think that's really good for the people that don't want to have a pure clear speed thing, because this just made you go, 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 and felt like it pushed you to another level altogether, where I really don't particularly like that much. I never liked it in the past when you had to play Reeve, which is a skill I really liked, but the fact is that as I'm streaming, multitasking and all that, Reeve made me feel like I had to just be non-stop pushing the limit, and Delirium was a similar sort of case, at least until you get very, very well geared, where it's going to force you to play in a way that you might not want to play. Whereas New League should be a nice change from that, and hopefully doesn't have any of its own issues, which I'm sure it will. But that's another thing with this league. For the first month, it had some pretty big issues as well. So that's going to be sort of a similar case for just about every league. Every league seems to have their own big issues to start with. This one, however, frames were really bad for a lot of us, thanks to the mechanic, and that didn't just matter for Delirium, that mattered for everything, everywhere. So it was pretty tough to play even with a really good PC sometimes. A lot of the color scheme for the dangerous shit was just completely wrong, and the way some of this dangerous shit interacted with you was completely too much or too wrong. So we'll have to wait and see for the new one, but there were plenty of problems to start with on this one, where after about a month it got better, but still, once again, there was a bit too much going on, and a bit too much of it just all the time, I think. So there was a lot of critique there, I think a lot of negative stuff, but like I said, I didn't completely hate engaging with it. By the end of the league, I was still doing it, and I wasn't avoiding it, except for just for the coloring, but I did actually get pretty sick of it after two-ish months. Just not to the level where I hated the game, because one of the other really positive things that Delirium brought into the game were cluster jewels, and that's basically, as I mentioned in a previous video about Burnout, this is the type of shit that keeps me engaged throughout a league, throughout Path of Exile, when new mechanics arise and you can build new characters and revamp old characters and just get a lot more bang for your buck. And I think cluster jewels were a real positive step there once we figured out what to do with them. So you had no idea to begin with, is it worth using all cluster jewels, maybe one, whatever. Once you kind of figure out that most characters want at least one cluster jewel, but most characters actually run two, then you just know that, okay, build a sort of skeleton for a tree, try and fit in some really cool stuff, see what type of cool stuff is out there, and build around it. So cluster jewels are mostly what kept me engaged. I feel like if there were no cluster jewels this league, it would have been a lot more depressing to have to go through for the whole 3 months. But overall, thank God to the Clostridials and Delirium itself. Not a bad league as a whole, but plenty of problems. We'll give it like a fucking 7 out of 10 maybe, because there could have been a lot better. And if you're really into the whole clear speed side of things and pack size and all that, then maybe you're looking at a 9 out of 10. But plenty of people may have, who aren't as capable of making really strong characters, may have been looking at more like a 4 or 5 out of 10, I feel like. Whereas compare it to Metamorph or Delve, I think they were a couple of my biggest winning leagues ever. They're like a 9 or a 10, because even now, today, years later, I still want to engage with Delve all league long, and I enjoy the mechanic. Whereas this can grate down on you after a couple months, and hopefully taking a big step back from it for, you know, only seeing it every 10% of the time or so will make it less annoying to deal with, and the grey won't feel as bad because you won't see it anywhere near as often. May even be a nice change of pace from the big neon stuff that we're going to get. So I think that's all I need to say about Delirium. Overall, not the worst league, but certainly not the biggest winner in my book. Plenty of fun stuff to interact with, but after a while it just grinds you down. And the word I have been using and have used plenty today is oppressing. It's pretty oppressing. So I look forward to hopefully making a few more hipster and shitter characters next league, because it shouldn't matter as much. I feel like this one really forced me to make some serious business characters, while still mixing in a few memes here or there. But you couldn't really slip up and have some crappy characters, which is one of the things I didn't like about the league. That's it for Delirium wrap up. Yep, that's a league. We played it. It was still not that bad. Played the whole thing. I enjoyed Path of Exile for the past 3 months. Could it have been better? Yep. Could it have been worse? Definitely. In any case, I'll see you in the next video. Hope you guys enjoyed this little rant. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.